And good evening, I'm Jonathan Higgins.
I'm Rich Carlson.
And we're the Scanner Guys. Good evening and welcome to the show. In case this is your first time joining us, make sure you hit the subscribe button down below so you can always see when we have new videos available right here on the channel. We're live this evening. We've got a great topic of discussion. We're going to be talking about electric street railways, which is a very interesting mode of transportation that was a big thing in the early late 1800s and early 1900s. So we're going to dive into that. Just want to let you know that we do have some new stuff coming to the website. We have some trackside guides coming up for the mid-Atlantic area of the Northeast Corridor, basically running from New York to Washington, D.C. There's a new trackside guide for that area, which we just recently loaded. I'm working on loading a Charlotte area trackside guide, so that's coming soon to the website. So make sure you visit trainaficionado.com.
Cool.
Let's dive right into the slideshow.
You got it.
Excuse me. So tonight we're talking about electric street railways, and make sure you stay connected to our website and our social media channels. Follow, like, and subscribe to Train Aficionado on Facebook, Twitter, YouTube, Instagram, and then make sure you stop by our website as well for the Trackside Bulletin, which is our newsletter that we send out periodically. Visit our website, trainaficionado.com. All right, here's our agenda tonight, Rich. This is going to be a pretty interesting show with electric street railways, discovering forgotten streetcars, and we're also going to talk about locomotive builder plates, which is going to be interesting.
Yeah, that's one of my passions.
Sorry, I just had to take a drink there. So let's start off with electric street railways. All right, so there's an overview of what a typical streetcar looks like. They're also known as trolleys. As you can see here in the diagram, we have basically a trolley in the drawing there. It has a trolley pole, which connects up to the overhead wire or catenary, and that's 600 volts of power, DC power. So that means it's direct current. Our homes have alternating current, so it's direct current. So if you touch that wire, you will be unfortunately 6 feet under, basically.
It'll be the last wire you ever touch.
That's for sure. And you can see in the photo there that the conductor there is actually putting up the trolley pole up to the wire there. And typically, a lot of these trolleys you're going to see photos of have two of these trolley poles, and typically the trolley pole is trailing the rear of the trolley. So it'll always be behind. The one that's up will be in the back of the trolley, and then of course the trolley will be moving forward. When it changes direction, one pole will go up, the other pole will go down, and it'll go the other direction. And you'll see some examples of that tonight. So you're going to see a lot of systems out there when you do research on trolleys. There's regional systems. This was in Massachusetts, the Old Colony Street Railway Company. And I just took a snippet of the map. This was quite a large map. It just all of southeastern Massachusetts pretty much. But what I've done is I've taken a lion's share of the area from Brockton to Taunton, Massachusetts to Middleborough. And these regional systems would go from town to town. So it would run pretty much a long distance, almost like a regional bus system, if you think of it. And these trolleys would run on tracks and typically on roads just like vehicles on the streetways. This trolley map was 1910. So this shows you what a regional system looks like. And then this would work in partnership with your your railway services, with the trains that would run, from Boston to New York and so on. So what you would basically do is you would get off at the train station, and then let's say you got off at South Station in Boston and you needed to get down to Brockton, Massachusetts. You would take various trolleys to get to your destination. And then you would, of course, arrive to Brockton, and you would be all set. And then when you would go back, same thing, take a bunch of different trolley lines, get into Boston. Out of Boston, you would go out of South Station to New York and points beyond. Now, this is a larger, more familiar, and they're still using streetcars here, Rich. Isn't that right?
Yeah, I've actually been on that in New Orleans. There's the New Orleans streetcar, the Charles Street line is still operational, and it pretty much looks like it did 100 years ago.
Yeah, and you can see here that, unlike Boston, the streets were very planned out. It's got the grid type of system. Seems like the same here. And you can see on the map on the screen there, all the red indicates a trolley line or a streetcar line. So there were several lines that went, going east to west or north to south and so on. Some of them went across town. As you can see there's all those red lines that you see on there would take you to various locations. And there was some green lines that would go to other areas as well. And you could see an old photograph there up above of the trolley lines running right on the same streets as the cars.
Yeah, and that's pretty much how they ran. And once they got out of town, at least in the Midwest, they would call them interurbans. And some of the interurban railroads were extensions of city streetcars, and some were independent. But sometimes those definitions can be a little blurred.
That's for sure. So that is what it looks like for a city system. So we saw a regional system and a city system. Let's take a look at some of the history. So in 1832, the first horse-drawn streetcars on rails began along Bowery Street in New York. Mm-hmm. And then in 1835, New Orleans became the second city in America to offer horse-drawn carriage service. Now, if you look over to the photo on the right, you can see both modes: the horse-drawn in the center of the photo, and then the electric streetcar over to the right of that.
Yeah, it's probably during the transition phase. By the 1920s, I'm sure all the horse-drawn cars were probably long gone.
That's for sure. And then, big year, 1888, Richmond Union Passenger Railway and successful system using fully electric streetcars.
Yeah, that had to be a big deal back then.
That's
most houses didn't even have electricity yet.
Yeah, and they were able to master it there. And then the system that they created in Richmond was basically duplicated in all the larger cities and regional systems across the country. They finally mastered that. And then by 1889, a lot of systems had replaced most of the horse-drawn systems to electric power. As you can see here, the New York system, because of its size, was probably using still electric and the horse-drawn streetcars as well. That's a little bit of history, and you can see it was the mid to late 1800s where things started to take off with streetcars.
Yep.
Now, the Biddeford-Saco Railroad, car number 31. Now, this one's a special streetcar that's up at the Seashore Trolley Museum in Kennebunkport, Maine. Now, this was their first car that's in their collection. A couple of rail fans actually put together a group to be able to save car number 31. And the museum, well, the foundation, I should say, was started in 1939. And this car retired in 1939, and this car was never used as anything else. Basically, it was used for passenger service, and then they bought it for, you wouldn't believe this price, $150.
Which back then was a pretty good sum, but still dirt cheap.
Still dirt cheap. And this streetcar can be operated on both ends, and it's one of the streetcars that you probably would see during the spring and summer and maybe in the fall months up in Maine. You would definitely see this car out because it's, meant for the warm weather. It's got 60 seats in there, which, those
Before
benches.
they invented windows, huh?
Yeah. But yeah, I mean, the Seashore Trolley Museum is awesome up in Maine. You're going to see a lot of photos this evening from there. This was from their 75th anniversary. They basically rolled out a whole bunch of their trolleys that were operational, and I was able to get a lot of these photos this evening. Now, Connecticut. This Connecticut company, 838. This is another open air car. This was used as city and suburban streetcars, so this would either operate in some of the cities in Connecticut or would operate in between the cities. This one here was built in 1905 by J. M. Jones, was retired in 1948, and this had 15 benches. And a lot of these would go to the various football games, for the college football games in the state. And these would travel, to and from those stadiums, bringing people to the games. Here's, Rich, you were wondering about what happens in the winter.
Yeah.
There is some cars that are heated, and they do have windows that open and close. This is another trolley from Connecticut. This one is 1160. This one was built in 1906, retired in 1948. Yet again, a double-ended trolley. As you can see here, the trolley pole, if you look at the front of the trolley where the driver is there,
Yep.
You can see that pole is tied down, and then the rear pole is up. So when they travel forward, they're always using the rear pole. The reason behind that, it doesn't put pressure on the line. It's basically trailing the line, and it doesn't put any pressure on there. This trolley, if I remember correctly, in the front, it's got benches that face each other, and then in the middle, it's got these wicker type of seats that flip. So you could flip the seats from, depending on what direction the trolley was traveling.
Yeah, because it's very uncomfortable to ride. For some people, just cannot ride backwards. It's you try that in a train sometime that has reversible seats, and try sitting backwards. It's very disconcerting sometimes.
Yes, for some people, yeah, it makes them want to, I'm not going to get into the,
queasy.
Yes, queasy, upset stomach, that's for sure.
Yeah.
Here's another one that's really cool. This one is from the Boston area. This one was operated in East Cambridge, Mass. In Cambridge. This one's built in 1900, the St. Louis Car Company. This was a part of the Boston Elevated Railway, and this is car number 396. Now, this is also a double-ended car. Unfortunately, during the winter months, as you can see here, it was probably a bit chilly for the operator.
Yeah. Yeah, they most of the times, if they had an enclosed car, they would have an enclosed compartment for the operator, but not always.
Not always. This one, the operator was out in the weather elements on this one, that's for sure.
Yeah.
This is a double-ended car as well, 34 seats. These trolleys, of course, are all from the Seashore Trolley Museum. I was able to go to their 75th anniversary, and these were all paraded out, and this kind of helped me put together the slideshow presentation. This one, they recently was able to restore this one here, and I believe I was at the museum when they brought it out, to operation. Mm-hmm. So a lot of times these trolleys, have been repurposed. Some of them have been homes and other things, and they found some trolleys in some strange places, and they've been able to salvage them and return them to operation. Now, this one here is the Dallas Railway and Terminal Company 434. This was built by the American Car Company in 1914, and was retired in 1954. Now, this operated within the cities and suburban streetcar, and it's double-ended 48 seats. Now, you notice with some of the other cars, they had a wooden exterior. Now we're starting to get into that metal and steel exterior, so these would last a lot longer.
Yeah, and it looks like this car may have had the operator cabs either added to or added on at some point. I wonder if maybe some of these cars were trailers and had operator cabs added to it. It just kind of looks like it was the operator cab was kind of an afterthought.
Yeah, I mean this is pretty close to what they restore all these trolleys back to the way they were. But yeah, I mean the other thing
could have been
too,
designed that way too, but it just has that kind of look to it,
Yeah, I'm sure it was probably designed that way just because of they took an old body style and they improved upon it. They kind of made it a little bit longer, being able to have extra space for the operator in the front.
Sure.
This is another one that they recently, probably within the last 10 years, restored, and it's a beautiful car. It's the Wheeling Tractor 639, built in 1924 by the Cincinnati Car Company, was retired in 1948. This one has that curved side suburban look to it. So, I mean, it's very sleek with its curves. And, of course, more than likely would pull up to a platform. This one operated year-round, 44 seats in there. The windows did open, so they could run this car with the windows open as well. This is a fairly large trolley car here. So
for
a lot of room.
Small city like Wheeling, West Virginia, it seems like kind of a big car for such a relatively small city.
Yeah, certainly. I mean, they really did a great job restoring this one. It just looks great.
Looks beautiful.
DC Transit 1304. This is starting to look a little bit more like the modern streetcars that you would see in Boston on some of the older lines. This
Toronto and some of the other ones look like that too.
Yeah, this one was built in 1941 by the St. Louis Car Company. Was retired in 1962. This one ran in the cities and suburban streetcars, designed by the PCC, which is the President's Conference Committee. So what ended up happening is so many of these cities and towns would have streetcars operating. They actually, a lot of the owners started a committee which had some input to the manufacturers, what they were looking for in a streetcar, and that's how the PCC was founded.
So there's a reason then why this looks like Toronto. I didn't even see that until then, because in Toronto, up until a few years back, they had a lot of streetcars that looked very similar to this, and they were all PCC cars. So that makes sense.
Yeah, this is a single-ended operated car. So typically they would be a loop at the end of the line, and then they would just flip it right around. And 48 seats, and I believe this had the ability to be coupled together as well. So you could have more than one car. And as you can see there, right by the door, there is a mirror, so you're able to see the traffic, whether it's a double-laned in each direction road, you'll be able to see the traffic that's beside of you and so on. I mean, this is certainly a really cool one. And this
looks like it might even had air conditioning.
Yeah, a lot of these older ones, especially in this one, had air conditioning. A lot of the older ones did have heat. And then you saw the open air cars, which is how they got their air conditioned when you were rolling
Yeah.
along.
Called the 240 air conditioning.
That's
Two
for sure.
windows, 40 miles an hour.
Yep. The Montreal car. This is something that the museum has loaned out to them, and they're only able to use this so many hours within a year. And this is a sightseeing car. Reminds you of a lot of those tourist buses when you go into the city. This would be the equivalent to it. It's wide open, so you're able to look up and look around. The operator, of course, is ahead of you, and it's almost like a theater type of seating, where it's got stairs that go all the way up. So people would be sitting in front of you. Your view still wouldn't be obstructed because you're in that type of theater setting.
Yep.
This car, of course, is open air, as you can tell, and has 50 seats. So this was a pretty roomy car.
Yeah, it looks like it would be a lot of fun to ride around town in one of those.
Yeah, I mean, it's the perfect sightseeing car there, and this is car number 2, which is right at the Seashore Trolley Museum. Now, not everything carried passengers. The Union Street Railway Company had a postal car. And this car here was originally a horse-drawn carriage car. Was built in 1878, and then, of course, by 1894 was electrified. This car would carry the mail, and it was operating in New Bedford, Massachusetts. It was a double-ended operated car. So at 1938, and unfortunately, the museum has this. It was damaged due to the Great New England Hurricane of 1938. So it probably damaged, with flooding and so on, damaged the mechanical system. Hopefully, maybe someday they'll be able to restore this back. They do have one that is operational. It's quite larger than this. Spent some of his time growing up in New Bedford, so when we would visit the museum, we would always check on this old trolley car from New Bedford, and this is one of those cars. And it's and most of the postal cars were in this dark green color and that yellow lettering. So they all pretty much look the same, kind of like your postal trucks nowadays, which are the red, white, and blue colors.
Yeah, I think they call that Pullman green.
Yeah, I think so. Yes. So if you ride the trolley at the Seashore Trolley Museum, you would start out at the main campus, and then you would go down probably about a mile or so, a little over a mile, out to Talbot Park. And this is how the trolleys operated 7 days a week. Typically, Monday through Saturday, a lot of people would work 6 days a week. Some people would work 5 days a week. So they would use the trolleys for commuting to and from work. Students would use it going to and from school. And then shopping trips in and out of the city. Now, on the weekends, Saturday and Sunday, the trolleys would continue running. And what they ended up doing was creating a picnic groves or pavilions at the end of the line. And sometimes these would be concert and dances would take place. And then amusement parks. Most of all, of course, the trolley lines are electrified. So the electricity came in handy for amusement parks. This basically gave people a reason to ride the trolley 7 days a week. And so if you were at the Seashore Trolley Museum, we would get to Talbot Park, and they would say, why is there a park at the end of the line? And this is the reason. Yeah. For those people that, that want to go leave town for the day or do something fun or interesting, they could take a ride on the trolley, spend a little bit of money outside of home, not having to go to work. They could enjoy either amusement park or a picnic at the trolley parks. And this is a trolley park that was in California, Oakland, California, and this photo was taken in 1910.
And
So
that
this
was
is
pretty common in the Midwest as well. One of the more famous ones is Ravinia, which is a concert venue in the north suburbs of Chicago, and that was actually built by the North Shore Line Railroad as a way to generate traffic on their lines. And the South Shore Railroad did the same thing with some of the beaches in Indiana and built some amusement parks. So yeah, it was a popular thing to do in the Midwest as well.
yeah. I mean, this is totally it's totally awesome to be able to ride in the history. And a lot of those photos that you just saw were from the Seashore Trolley Museum. We'll continue on with the presentation here. Let's take a look what our next slide is. So this is discovering forgotten streetcars. And in my travels, I was able to find this building that's over on the two photos that are on the right-hand side are actually a trolley barn, and was repurposed to a manufacturing facility. And this was a part of the Norwich and Westerly Railway, I should say. This was a car house in Preston, Connecticut. And this was a part of the 21-mile interurban trolley system. So this would be, of course, where they would store the trolleys, do maintenance, and so on. Most of this right-of-way has been preserved. They've been using it for transmission lines for the Connecticut Light and Power Company. So very fitting. There was trolley lines, power lines along this route. There's still power on this route. It's just, transmission lines, to feed your homes with electricity. But yeah, I was driving. Any of you that are familiar with Connecticut, there's two casinos, Foxwoods and Mohegan Sun. And there's this back way to drive in between both of them. A lot of times my wife and I would go out there, for a day just to get out of the house. We'd go over to both of the casinos, maybe have lunch at one, maybe see a show at another one. We're not big gamblers whatsoever. But we were driving, and I saw this building, and I said, that's got to be an old railroad building. So after doing research, I took photos. I had my camera, so I took photos of the building. And then later on, getting home, I discovered it was a car house for the trolley line here.
Yeah. Well, the thing is it's not unusual that would have been the right of way would have been retained by the local power company. And many times with these interurbans and trolley lines, they were either created by an electric utility to create another user for the power, or the railroad brought power to that and eventually became part of the utility. So it was very common for electric railroads to be part of the power company. The North Shore Line in Chicago was just like that. It was owned by the same guy who owned Commonwealth Edison, and they're very integrated with each other, and that was very common with a lot of electric railways.
Yeah, I was just, I love being able to find the history and the right-of-ways, and this was one of those finds that I was quite excited about. And then I just stumbled across these photos. I was looking at the photos for the slideshow, and I stumbled across this. I said, this is perfect. This will go right into the slideshow. Yeah. So let's...
and they built those buildings to last, and that's why a lot of them are still existent and being repurposed.
Yeah. Oh, yeah. Definitely. This brick structure is built to last. And you can see the black and white photo was the Westerly train station. So you can see where the interurban trolley system would connect up with the train system. So people would go to Westerly, either coming from Boston or New York, Westerly, Rhode Island, that is. So they would either go from Boston to New York, take the train. They would get off the train, take one of these interurban trolley systems, and then go to their next destination. So the Seashore Trolley Museum, I can't say enough about them. They have the largest and oldest collection of streetcars and trolleys out there. They're located in Kennebunkport, Maine. The Trolley Museum also has an amazing collection of mass transit vehicles. So they have a lot of buses and things like that as well. And they have a restoration shop with the observation walkway above. So you're able to see the projects that they're working on. I would totally recommend, if you're up in the Northeast, to check out the Seashore Trolley Museum. Follow them on their social media. You get to see a lot on there, what they're restoring and what's going on at the museum. And as earlier, operating along a, uh, a trolley line, which was an interurban trolley line. And during the summer months, they could have up to 5 different trolleys running on the line. And guess what? You pay, I forget, it's like $10 or so, and you can spend the whole day there and ride on all the trolleys that are running in that particular day. And then they have the car barns open, which you can take a look at the various trolleys that are not operating in that particular day. They have an amazing gift shop and so on. So this is definitely worth the trip. So the Seashore Trolley Museum in Kennebunkport, Maine.
I've been to Kennebunkport, but never been there. But that's on my bucket list now.
All right. So while you're up in the Northeast, make sure you check out East Haven, Connecticut, the Shoreline Trolley Museum. They just recently built a brand new facility for storing their trolleys. So it's a new car barn. They're right along the coast of Connecticut, so they were dealing with a lot of issues with weather, especially with hurricanes. So they ended up building a brand new storage facility because where their current car barn was subject to flooding, especially with hurricanes. Yeah. So they built a brand new facility there right away. It is about 1.5 miles as well, and it's an historical right away. It's on the Branford Electric Railway right away. So that, trolleys were operating on that right away, and they still are to this day. And this is a beautiful place, to check out. And I got to say, it's right along the ocean, the right away. So you get some peaks at the ocean. You get to see the marshes. This is a beautiful ride. So definitely check out the Shoreline Trolley Museum, and that's in Connecticut. And also, we've got a whole list of United States trolley museums and streetcar museums. You can see that they're from Baltimore to Connecticut to Illinois, Memphis. There's even one in Washington, D.C. So, there's tons of places to go to check out trolleys. And there's a lot of rich history there because most cities or towns did have trolleys, whether it be a regional system or a local city system. And also San Francisco has what they call cable cars, a little bit different from a trolley, but they also have a museum there as well. So these are all the museums that are throughout the whole entire United States. So definitely check these out.
Yeah, I've been to about 6 or 7 of these.
Yeah, I mean, they look totally awesome.
Oh yeah. Well, the Illinois Railroad Museum, it's the largest railroad museum in the country, and they do have a fairly extensive set of trolley and interurban and streetcar operations. Plus, they also have trolley buses, quite a few trolley buses as well as some diesel buses. The Fox River Trolley Museum is south of Elgin, between Elgin and Aurora, Illinois. And they had a bad vandalism problem incident a year or two ago. Some kids got in and did quite a bit of damage, and it was very expensive, but they've got that repaired. East Troy is another one that I've been on, and that's a lot of fun. I've been to the one in Baltimore, the one in Phoenix. I've been to the one in Frisco. I've been to the one in Yakima, Washington. That's kind of an obscure one. And then there's also the museum, the North Shore. It's up in Duluth, and I'm trying to remember the name of it. And they have a couple of the local streetcars up there as well. I just can't remember the name of the railroad museum up in Duluth. So if you ever get up that way, there's one to check out.
Yeah, this is certainly a lot of great places to check out. I mean, preserving preserving the history. But yeah, these are the ones that are on the list here are they have a substantial amount of streetcars or
Yeah.
trolleys that are listed, and some of these are strictly trolley museums. So there's other museums out there, but these are probably where the collection is vast majority is streetcar or trolleys. So let's continue on with the slideshow here. We're going to go into Rich's portion of it. So this is his archive. We're looking at locomotive builder plates. So tell us about the first one we're looking at right here.
All right, so this is off Lake Superior in Ishpeming, LS&I U23C. The LS&I is up in the UP of Michigan, one of my favorite railroads ever. Spent a lot of time up there back in the 80s and 90s. And the builder plates on a locomotive, this was on a General Electric locomotive. They're riveted to the frame of the locomotive, usually below the cab. And it's going to give you certain information. On this particular one, it tells you who built it, which is the General Electric Transportation Systems Division in New York, or actually in Pennsylvania. And then it's going to give you the model number on this one. It's going to give the weight in tons. So it's 358,000 pounds. So it's not in tons, but it's in thousands of pounds. And then the locomotive serial number, which is every locomotive that's got its own serial number. The horsepower, which is in this case is 2,250. When it was manufactured, and the maintenance instruction book number. And they're fascinating because, like I say, every locomotive has got one, and they actually put a lot of work in it. This one is cast iron, and they are actually very collectible. And when you find one of these on eBay or other for sale, you're going to get a lot of money for them. And unfortunately, some people have stolen them from locomotives, but that's a totally different story. But they are riveted onto the frame, so they're kind of hard to take off, which is a good thing because we want to preserve them. So we'll go to the next one.
Yeah, so you were talking about
Yeah.
people stealing these. The other thing that a lot of people steal are the numbers of the
Yeah.
locomotives, the
Yeah, the number
plates,
boards.
the number boards, which is really crazy. Um, for these, Rich, are they typically located in the same location on all the locomotives, or does it vary?
Usually they're on the right-hand side of the locomotive, the engineer side, below the cab. Sometimes they're a little more forward, like right before the forward marker, the front marker on this particular locomotive. This is a rebuilt Jeep, and the builder's plate is just below the BL 20-2 markings there. You can see it right there on the frame. And it's usually in or about that position on the right hand side below the cab.
Wow, that's cool. And then I'm guessing when these are rebuilt, the plates are replaced with new information.
Sometimes, depending on the level of rebuilding, and we'll see a couple of those a little bit later on. But sometimes they will replace it with a new plate, or if the information on the plate is still relatively accurate. And a lot of it has to do with finances, to tell you the truth. When they rebuild a locomotive, it depends on how they couch it. If they rebuild it in kind, it's basically okay, we're going to swap the engine, add some new electrics. It really isn't a new locomotive, it's just updated. Sometimes they will totally remanufacture it and make it into a new locomotive reusing the frame. In that case, it will normally get a new builder's plate.
I see. So let's take another look at the next slide here. Ooh, these are some interesting ones here.
Yeah, so the one on the left is the old style or the Kerr style from EMD, Electromotive Division, and they used that in the 50s and the 60s for and locomotives ranging from the F and E units into the Jeep 7, Jeep 9, Jeep 20, and up until about the Jeep 30. It was around the Jeep 40 series that they switched over to the more rectangular one that you see on the right. They're easier to manufacture. The rectangular ones, they don't have to be cut or pressed out. It and it's a lot easier to do. And what EMD does, instead of casting the plate, they will make a bunch of plates and then they stamp the numbers in it. So unfortunately, these pictures are not quite clear enough, so you can't really see it, but those numbers are just stamped in there. And they'll take a number stamp with a hammer and pow, and put that in there. One of the neat things that EMD did is they classified their locomotives like steam engines. So a GP 38, like the Sioux Line Jeep 38 number board there, the class on that would be 0440. No leading truck, two powered axles, or four powered wheels or two powered axles, two more powered axles, and then no trailing truck. So it was a class 0440, and they did that up until the Dash 2 series, which was kind of unusual and weird, but that's just the way they did it. And at that time during the 80s is when they made it more of a GM thing and used the regular GM logo versus the older style.
Wow. I mean, so that's super interesting,
Yeah.
To see a GM, the logo on one of these locomotives, that's for
Oh
sure.
yeah. Well, General Motors doesn't own Electromotive anymore. It's owned by Progress Rail, which is a subsidiary of Caterpillar. But it's still It's still EMD now. It's Electromotive Diesel instead of Electromotive Division. But they still make locomotives, and they're no longer headquartered in LaGrange, and they no longer make them in LaGrange. But they actually have a finishing facility there, though.
All right. So now we go from GM to
Yeah.
GE.
So GM at that time was the biggest manufacturer, and GE was always playing catch up. And the roles are reversed now. So the one on the left is from a Burlington Northern B30-7A. It's actually a B unit, but the model number was a B30-7A. So there was no cab on this locomotive. But again, you see that the model number is listed there, the weight, the serial number, the maintenance instructions, the date that it was manufactured, and the horsepower. And then later on, in the mid 80s, they started switching over to this more taller, with a much larger GE emblem on it.
Yeah.
And I mean, it shouts at you, GE. And again, very much the same information on it. It's just laid out differently. The one on the right hand side is from a Chicago Northwestern C40-8, number 8502. I actually got this picture in Bill, Wyoming, which is out in the coal country. The Burlington unit, I think I got that out in Alliance, Nebraska. Also, probably on the same trip, because it was I got them in the same year, so it was probably on that same trip.
And you're certainly not getting these photos while it's moving, that's for sure.
No. And like I said, I'm not going to take the plates off the locomotives. I'm not that kind of guy. But taking a picture of it is it's more fascinating. And I don't know why, but that was just something that I thought was really fascinating.
So we'll dive into the next section here, which these look pretty interesting. Let me put these up right on the screen. So it's American Locomotive Products. Wow, and the one on the right has seen better days.
Yeah, it's a little wore out. So Alco was the big cheese when they were making steam engines, but they never really made it big in diesels. They were always the second or third biggest on the diesels until they went out of business. But on the left-hand side, that was a World War II vintage RS1 that ended up on the Arkansas, Missouri, and that's where I got this picture. It was in 1990 or 91 in Arkansas. And again, that one is cast. I don't know if it's cast iron or cast steel. And it's kind of neat because at that time, Alco and General Electric were partners. Alco made the locomotive, General Electric made the electric um, running gear, the generator, the traction motors, and the like. While Alco made the frame and the diesel engine, and it was Alco GE. And until General Electric came up with their own locomotive line in the late 50s, Alco GE was a partnership, and you didn't have one without the other. Um, and then later on, when GE broke that partnership up, Alco was on their own, and they called themselves Alco Products Incorporated instead of American Locomotive Company. And they had, instead of a cast plate, they did like GM did and made pre-made plates and then just stamped the information into it with the stamp and hammer.
I really like the plate over on the left. That looks really sharp.
Those cast plates, if you were to get that particular cast plate, that one may actually be a replica, because the Arkansas Missouri is a big Alco company. They may have replicated that one, but if you get an original one like that, you're talking $5,000 to $10,000 in that condition.
Wow, that is crazy that there's money just alone and
Yep.
just having these plates.
Yeah, some of them are brass, some of them are cast steel or iron, but those are again, that was and the locomotives were, you know, they were very, obviously big pieces of and very expensive pieces of equipment, and they were very proud of them, and that's what they did with those. The stamped ones were a little bit, easier to make, obviously, and less attractive, but just as functional.
All right, let's take a look at the next one. Ooh, interesting. Rebuild shops.
Yeah. So Morrison Knudsen, if I'm pronouncing that correctly, they're a rebuild ship that were headquartered out in Iowa back in the 70s, and they did a lot of locomotive rebuilding for the various railroads. And they did a batch of, I think, about 30 E units for the Burlington Northern to rebuild their suburban commuter fleet. And so they took these old wore out E units and totally rebuilt them from the frame up. And since they were such an extensive rebuild, they put their own builder's plate on it. And it was a kind of a combination of a stamped or a cast plate with the year, and then a riveted on subplate with the specific information for that particular locomotive. And all of the Burlington Northern E units had that on there, and I'm sure they used it for their other locomotives that they built as well. On the right hand side is on a rebuilt Jeep, and this was a rebuild done by Illinois Central Railroad itself in their Paducah shop, and they rebuilt not only locomotives for themselves, but they also contracted and rebuilt locomotives for many other railroads. And since their rebuilds were so extensive, they would create their own builder's plate, very similar to the EMD plates, which it was a flat piece of metal with the information stamped on it. But of course, it read the Paducah shops, and it was done by Illinois Central, and it was a remanufactured locomotive versus being rebuilt. And so there's a technical difference between the two of them. But otherwise, the plate is very similar in placement and use as to those used on brand new locomotives.
I see. All right, let's take a look at the next one here. All right, more of them.
All right. So Montreal Locomotive Works was a an independent company in Montreal, but they contracted or licensed out the designs of Alco. So they built steam engines and then later on diesel locomotives. And this was from an RS-23, which is a road switcher,
Mm-hmm.
kind of equivalent to like a Jeep 38 type locomotive. Made by MLW in Montreal to the Alco design, and this was on a locomotive in the Greater Winnipeg Water District, which I actually got a cab ride on. My buddy Jim and I were on our way through there, and we stopped in and talked to those guys, and they let us go up on the locomotive. And they said, if you come back at 2 o'clock, we'll take you on a ride out to the end of the line. And sure enough, we did, and they used it for their work out there. And it was this locomotive was built in August of 1960 in Montreal, and again they licensed the design from Alco in New York. On the right hand side, this was a locomotive that was rebuilt by General Motors, and this is the plate they used for the rebuilt locomotives that were considered new, but they were really basically a new locomotive on old frames. And so they used a little bit different plate. And this one, they used a standard plate for both General Motors of in London, Ontario, as well as the U.S. shops. So GM was the owner, and on the left side you see the EMD logo for the U.S. locomotives, and then the GMD, General Motors diesel, which was the Canadian shop up in London, Ontario, and that was their diesel division, the DD mark on that. So this particular one was a one built in LaGrange, and if you look closely, which unfortunately you really can't see in this picture, both LaGrange, USA, or London, Canada, are listed there, and they just would stamp an X in the appropriate box which shop it was built at.
I see. So there's no. It was just basically checking the box.
Yeah, basically, they would make the 150 or 200 of those plates, and they would just grab one off the pile and mark the appropriate information on it.
Perfect. Wow, that is awesome. So let's continue on here. We want to make sure that you stay connected with us. If you haven't already, please hit the subscribe button to the channel. You're watching this on our YouTube channel, hit the subscribe button. We would love to get you as a subscriber on the channel. As well, check out the Train Aficionado blog at trainaficionado.com. Follow, like, and subscribe to our social media as well. Facebook, Instagram, YouTube. We're everywhere there. So make sure you follow, like, and subscribe to all of our channels as well. And we want to let you know about our other show that Rich and I host. It's the Scanner Guys on the Scanner Guys YouTube channel. Our next show will be about maritime monitoring. So we're going to get wet and wild with the scanner and talk about, what you can listen to on the scanner when it comes to maritime. And that'll be on Wednesday, March the 3rd, 8 p.m. Eastern Time, 5 p.m. Pacific. So make sure you tune in for that one. That's going to be a really good show there as well. This certainly was a pretty interesting topic. We kind of dived into some obscure places in the hobby. The history of the streetcar, and then also on the manufacturing side of these plates. Now people probably will start looking for these plates when they see the locomotive parked. When was it manufactured? What was its serial number? Kind of its little bit of a tiny story of that particular locomotive.
Yeah, absolutely. And once you find those builder plates on the locomotives, they really do get interesting. And the way I got introduced to that was when I was up in the Upper Peninsula of Michigan, and we stopped by the Escanaba and Lake Superior Railroad up in Wells, which is just outside of Escanaba. And they had a big sign on at the entrance to the property said rail fans not wanted or permitted, and stay out. So they were not very accommodating to rail fans. And I was kind of like, oh, that's not real nice. Well, then I found out the story behind it, and I really don't blame them. Somebody broke into their facility and stole things like locomotive manuals and builder's plates and other brass work from some of their historical locomotives, a big Baldwin users at the time. And it was stuff only a rail fan would want. So you really can't blame them for being kind of torqued off. And so then at that time, I really didn't know what a builder's plate was. So I kind of asked around, and got pointed out, and I was like, well, this is pretty cool. So every time I saw one, I would take a picture of it and keep it for prosperity. And I never actually was able to acquire one. Every one that I actually saw that was for sale, I was either stolen or too expensive for me. So if they could prove their provenance, I would buy it, but not the prices they were asking for them.
Oh, I know, it's crazy. Even just with you covering this topic was even some of the passenger coaches have these
Mm-hmm.
plates. I remember when a few years ago, before I moved to Massachusetts, moved out of Massachusetts to North Carolina. I went on some the CT Transit, the new line basically running from the Northeast Corridor up to Springfield, and they were
Yeah.
leasing some of the MBTA cars. Of course, they repainted the outside, had their logo and all that business. But inside, sure enough, there was a plate, manufactured for the MBTA, what year, and so on and so forth. So yeah, I mean,
Yep.
there's probably even on the trolleys, if I went looking for it, there's probably manufacturer plates on there as
It could
well.
be too. One of the things I do when I get on an airplane is when you go into the airplane, at the door nearest the cockpit on the left side is where the plates are for most airliners. And you can see there's a very similar plate, obviously much smaller, um, on or near that door. And a couple times I've snapped pictures of them, and the stewardesses look at me kind of weird, like, I'm sorry, the flight attendant looking at me like, what are you taking it? And I said, oh, I'm a plane nut. And oh, okay, you're one of those. Okay. And
Yeah.
so, yeah, a lot of places will have that. It's kind of like a VIN number on a car.
Hmm.
It's going to be a unique plate to identify that specific airplane, car, locomotive, what have you.
You know what the equivalent of it basically is? It's like the plane train birth certificate.
Mm-hmm.
It's given all the details of where it was born, what
Yeah.
year, who created it.
Yeah.
Essentially, it's like a birth certificate.
Yeah. Very, yeah. Very, that's a really good analogy.
Yeah. But
So,
yeah,
or like the title for your car, that it's that kind of official thing. And obviously, these things can be valuable, especially on historic locomotives. And unfortunately, they have become kind of a target. Originally, a lot of them were taken not for their historic value or their coolness, but because of the brass. The brass was very expensive and had melt value. And there's scrap yards that will take that stuff in and melt it down, which is unfortunate. But so if you ever come across one of these things and you think it might be stolen or other illegally obtained, you might want to do some notifications, especially if you can figure out where it came from.
yeah. I mean that's pretty sad. I mean, a few people that would ruin, like you mentioned about that yard that you went up to. It
Yeah.
took a few individuals to ruin it for everybody else, which is
Yeah,
pretty sad.
absolutely. And the ENLS at that time was they ran a lot of old Baldwin diesel locomotives, and they still have a couple of them, one or two of them that still run. But I mean, they had the Sharks that used to run on the New York Central, and they had a bunch of other Baldwins, and it was really a neat operation, and there's still a neat operation. But now it's mostly SD40s and GP40s. But yeah, it's sad that it came to that.
Yeah, I mean, going back to the streetcars, like
Mm-hmm.
Dale just mentioned in Montana, a lot of the
Mm-hmm.
cities you can still find evidence of the electric streetcars on some of the streets.
Yeah.
And my uncle worked for the water department in Taunton, Massachusetts, and they would occasionally have to replace pipes, and they ran into rails that
Yeah.
were they just paved over them.
Yeah.
Yeah, and that created a huge issue because they had to contend with with those issues.
Yeah, that comes up every once in a while. And in Chicago, I can actually remember when Chicago still had some streetcar lines. And then I was a very small child when they retired the last streetcars, but they still had trolley buses. And I can remember riding the trolley buses as well. I think they had one streetcar line. The last one was the one that ran out to like Midway Airport, if I remember correctly. And then they converted the remaining ones to trolley buses. And whenever they do street maintenance on a lot of these places, they'll dig up old rails, or there'll be some other evidence of it. And a lot of times you can go down a city street and it's you notice that that particular street is very wide and much wider than the streets in the other neighboring areas, probably because they had streetcars. A little town of Wilmette, which is north suburbs of Chicago. There's a section of the street there, and I forget the name of the street now, but it gets really wide up until a certain spot, and then it narrows down. Greenleaf Street, and then all of a sudden it narrows down. Well, it's wide there because you had two uh, tracks for the North Shore Line, the electric railroad, that ran there until 1955, and then right where the street narrows out is where it curved off and joined another track that wasn't on the street. So in the street running, the streets were really wide there.
Yeah, and the other thing that just amazes me is the city of Charlotte is growing,
Mm-hmm.
growing for many of the businesses and jobs that are out here in Charlotte. So they've been building and developing. They have a brand new light rail system that's running through the city, and they're also putting in a streetcar
Yeah.
system as well. So they're going back to this. The reason behind going back to a lot of this, whether it be light rail or streetcar systems, is a lot of the people that are millennials, prefer to use transit versus owning their own vehicle. You think of
Mm-hmm.
the amount of money that you and I would spend on a vehicle, maintenance and insuring it, and then paying car payments. It's a lot of money.
Oh yeah.
And then if you're able to live within a city or just outside of the city, and you're able to be dependent on a transit system, your monthly pass could be a lot cheaper than all that
Yeah.
combined.
And you see that popping up here and there. Here in Phoenix, they're putting in a lot of it's called light rail now,
Hmm.
and it's kind of a more modernized streetcar. And some of it really isn't intended as serious transit, like downtown Kenosha. They have a streetcar loop, which pretty much goes from no place to no place else, and it just goes around in a circle, and it's not very useful. It's almost no use for transit, and you go there on a Saturday afternoon, and you might be the only person on a car, and they keep on running it as kind of a tourist operation. It's cool, but they've always talked about extending that to where it might be something useful, and maybe taking something like that and running it from the downtown train station to the shopping mall, or to the hospital, or to a plant or something like that, where people might actually use it for transit purposes. And some places has never they've never left. Our buddy Les in Toronto. Toronto's got a very extensive streetcar system, and they were using PCC cars up until a few years back, and they've upgraded the cars since then. But that system's been in place for a long time, and they just never took it out, which is kudos to Toronto for keeping that.
Yeah, I mean, I'm just amazed, just seeing the construction that's going on in Charlotte. They
Mm-hmm.
are putting track on streets. This is something that they're going back to versus
Yeah.
a lot of cities are pulling these out. And they're finding that people are working and living in the city. They don't have vehicles. They need proper transit to be able to get to point A to point B,
Yeah.
whether it be like you said, to work, to hospital, to a transportation hub where multiple modes of transit intersect with one another.
Sure. Yeah, can you imagine having something like that in Chicago or LA? I mean, Chicago and LA, they've got subways and rapid transit. But other cities, like here in Phoenix, where they never really had commuter rail. They had
Hmm.
streetcars way back then, and now, and but most of that stuff went away before World War II, and now they're kind of rebuilding it. Unfortunately for me, the streetcars out here don't go anywhere near where I want to go. But if you live in downtown Phoenix, it's convenient to take you bouncing around. And I can imagine other large cities that don't have the transit, Charlotte or Raleigh or Richmond and Virginia City, who don't have the big suburban commuter service like they do in Chicago and LA and New York. Putting something like this in place, or rebuilding or reinstituting streetcars where they probably used to have them, and probably wish they never took them out.
Yeah. That's for sure. I mean, I went from one city where Boston, where it's an aging transit system,
Mm-hmm.
to Charlotte, where it's now everything's new. The lines are new, the cars are
Yeah,
new. They finally started, looking at the Boston subway system. They finally started replacing some of the cars that have been in operation since the 1970s.
yeah,
I mean, they're finally, replacing some of that equipment. I mean, they've been just, some of which, from what I understand, the manufacturers are no longer producing parts, so
right.
they have to, go to other means by having someone create the parts in order to, to keep them operational. It gets very costly.
Oh yeah, and it gets to the point where it's just not feasible to keep on patching up some of these old cars, and these cars belong in museum.
Yeah.
When it was what 25, 30 years ago when the South Shore line replaced their 1920s vintage cars, and they were not much more than streetcars. They were heavy duty streetcars basically. And now some of their stuff looks just like the stuff you would see on Metra or Caltran or something like that. And it's much more modern equipment, but it just doesn't have the same old feel that people kind of like.
Yeah, I mean the great thing about a lot of the stuff that we showed earlier in the presentation from the Seashore Trolley Museum, all that equipment's been redone and could actually go on like this system that's being built in Charlotte. It could be
Yeah.
operation. It's operational, which is amazing.
Oh yeah, yeah, and obviously you're not going to ride those every day in downtown Charlotte, but it would be kind of neat to
To see
let
those
them
rolled out.
stretch their legs. Yeah.
Yeah, I mean, especially in those open air cars, the way they are so
Hmm.
cool.
Oh yeah.
I remember my dad telling me a story when he was riding the trolley with my grandmother, and it was one of those open air cars, and she told him, "You better hold on." And then they messed around. They did move about. When
Yeah.
they were able to, to go, they were able to move.
Oh yeah. And you get a nice breeze going through there.
Yeah, that's why those open air cars, you didn't need air conditioning. Like you said, it was 40 miles an hour. What did you call it again?
Yeah, 240 air. Yeah, two windows, 40 miles an hour.
Yeah, the whole thing is wide open with that.
Yeah.
But yeah, I mean, that's totally, I would recommend to anybody, once, I'm sure things are opening up and a lot of these museums are open. If you haven't visited any of these museums, make sure you do that. I mean, there's a lot of great museums out there, and they're not terribly expensive at all. To be able to
Yeah.
go there and check them out. Not only these trolley and streetcar museums, there's a lot of transportation museums, railroad museums out there. Definitely. I'm a member of the North Carolina Transportation Museum. They're always moving stuff around. They have some rotating exhibits. So certainly support these guys. I mean, especially during this time where they've been seeing a lot less visitors coming to their museum. They're struggling like everybody else during this time with COVID. So if
Oh
you're
yeah.
able to
Absolutely.
venture out, certainly do so.
Yeah. And if you are financially able to support them, that would be a good cause. And most of them are nonprofits. So if they're 501c3s, your donations to them are most likely going to be tax deductible.
That's for sure. If you guys have any questions, certainly post them in the comments right now. We'll be happy to answer any of those questions. We see a lot of people, a lot of our regulars just checking in there. Thank you so much for joining us. If you're new to the channel, make sure you hit that subscribe button. It's very important to subscribe to our channel. It helps us, and it also helps you to get notifications when we have a new video up on the channel. So make sure you hit the subscribe button. But yeah, this is and the notification, the bell as well.
That's
So
right.
make sure
Hit the
you
ding-a-ling.
make sure you do that as well. I just seen a lot of
So,
comments, Rich, tonight. I don't think there was
yeah.
any
Well,
questions.
Dale's letting us know Bombardier, they make planes, trains, and snowmobiles. So, yeah, Bombardier is a Canadian company. They make the Canadian regional jet, which is a very popular um, um, feeder line. So things like American Eagle and Delta Connection, stuff like that. A lot of them use CRJ jets. I think those were made by Bombardier. If you got a snowmobile, good chance it was made by them. And they also made a lot of locomotive rebuilds. They bought what was left of MLW when they closed up, and they made a lot of transit cars as well for both the U.S. and Canada.
Yeah, some of the MBTA's passenger coaches came from there.
Okay.
They've got some of the double decker passenger coaches,
Mm-hmm.
and that's what the MBTA is trying to replace a lot of their single deckers with a double decker because they can have the same
Yeah.
length of train, but twice as many passengers when it's a double decker car.
Oh yeah. Well, Chicago, most commuter trains in Chicago are running what they call gallery trains. So the first floor is standard seating, and then on the second level, it's mostly inward facing seating. And the nice thing about that is the conductor can walk through the cards and get tickets from both levels without having to go upstairs. You can just go like that, and it's really efficient. Looks like Steve reports that Berks County, Pennsylvania, is trying to get commuter rail going back to to Philly again. They might have some problems with the the Norfolk Southern Railway, and there's Philadelphia's got a pretty extensive commuter service, but there's always room for more.
Yeah, I
Yeah.
mean, you're seeing a lot more people wanting the commuter rail. The state of Massachusetts, what they
You're going digital there again, Jonathan.
yeah, so the railroad lines, are going up for sale.
Mm-hmm.
So the state of Massachusetts has been purchasing those particular lines. So in hopes to eventually bring commuter rail or any other service to, there was here in Charlotte. Um, Lake Norman is where a lot of people live that are north of Charlotte, and
Mm-hmm.
they were talking about putting in a commuter rail line going up to Mooresville in that area. It'd be a north and south
Yeah.
line, and of course, it's a Norfolk Southern line. They're not running too many trains on there whatsoever. It's probably like one or two trains, maybe a week. And of
Yep.
course, Norfolk Southern has kind of ixnayed it. I'm not too sure what the reasoning behind it. I mean, I guess they
I'm
don't.
sure they don't want to have interference with their freight operations. They might have one freight train a week, and they don't want any disruption to that.
Yeah, well, in
So
their words, they said, the line is too valuable to us to.
yeah,
And this is a line, that's intact, well beyond the Lake Norman area. It
hmm,
actually will go further all the way up to the Norfolk Southern S line.
yeah,
So it could be expanded. Unfortunately, I noticed that North Carolina has a transportation system that which runs from Raleigh down to Charlotte, but it's not. commuter friendly. One,
Right.
it's 2 hours and change. I think it's almost 3 hours, and plus there's a few additional trains that need to be added to the schedule in order to make it so it's Monday through Friday 9 to 5 friendly,
Yeah.
and
But,
that's
scheduling is key when it comes to that. It's probably more geared for inner city travel than commute type travel.
yeah. I
Uh,
mean, looking at the schedule,
yeah.
I was looking at the schedule. As a matter of fact, I have it on the wall here. If they added a few more trains, you could get, adding a train in
Hmm.
the morning and a train in the evening, you could get that commuter back in, commuter type of feel to it.
Yeah. There was while I was living in the north suburbs of Chicago, the Wisconsin Central was approached by Metra, who runs the commuter trains out there, about starting traffic on the line that actually went right past my house. And the Wisconsin Central at the time was very receptive to that. And the main reason is that Metra would finance a big upgrade to their tracks, which would benefit their freight operations. And the restriction being is during the commuter rush in the morning and the afternoon, the commuter trains would have priority. And the Wisconsin Central was a small enough operation where they could work around that. And they did. And it was been very successful. And one of the neat things they did is they put a stop right by O'Hare Airport. So whenever I would fly, the train station was 3, 4 blocks from my house. I could walk there, or if the weather was bad, the wife would drive me and drop me off at the train station. I'd take the train to the airport, and they had shuttle buses from the train station to take you right to the airport. What a dream that was to get to and from the airport.
Yeah, I mean that's is the thought process of merging the multiple transit systems
Yeah.
together is just being able to have that access to it, and parking your car at the airport is not cheap whatsoever,
Oh no.
especially if you're gone for an extended period of time, a week or so.
Yeah.
I mean
Even the remote lots are $15 a day. Yeah.
yeah, I mean, so they were trying to they have a brand new station that is serviced Monday through Friday by the MBTA,
Hmm.
but it's not serviced on the weekends, so which is
Yeah.
not a value for the airport at this point. Also, it's not set up for Amtrak to stop at.
Right.
They were trying to negotiate that, but the way they set up the station, it's on a siding which doesn't have the canaries
Right.
above, so they would have to put that in. But they're working on it, so it would be where you would have
Yeah.
now get set up on the weekend if you're flying out of TF Green, or if you're playing rail, forget it. On the weekends, it doesn't have any value to you.
In Chicago, they put L service to both the O'Hare Airport and Midway, which are the two big airports in Chicago. So on O'Hare Airport, back in the early 80s, they extended the Jefferson Park line out to the airport through the center of the expressway. And now that line basically ends in the basement of the airport. And you can take a train from the airport all the way downtown. And then they created a brand new line, the Orange Line, to go to Midway. And again, you could ride the train from downtown Chicago out to Midway. You can even take a train from O'Hare. Well, you could take two trains. You'd take a train from O'Hare downtown and hop on another train and take it out to Midway if you had to have a connecting flight. So they've done a great job of connecting those airports to the city transit system. Milwaukee, there's an Amtrak stop, which is not bad, but it's not as convenient as having the train right there. I don't think they've done anything like that in New York or LA yet, but hopefully maybe one day these will.
Yeah, I mean, you look at Boston, in between North and South Station. So basically, South Station is all the commuter rail for the southeastern portion of
Hmm.
the state, and then you look at and then some of the western part of the state as well, and then North Station
Yeah.
is feeding all of the northern part of Massachusetts, northeastern part of Massachusetts. There is not a direct connection in between the two stations. When they started the Big Dig project, I'm not too sure if you're familiar with heard about the multi-billion trillion dollar
Yeah.
project. They were originally going to create, along with the tunnel, for the vehicle traffic, they were going to create a tunnel to connect railway wise North and South Station. Currently, right now, there's not a connection in between the two that has passenger service. There is a
Right.
way to get to North and South Station.
How far
Basic,
apart are they?
they're not that far apart. It's like a couple of miles. It's probably like air miles, probably about 2-3 miles at
Yeah.
most. I'm just taking a guess. It could be less, but it's
Yeah.
not very far from one to the other. It's just there's not a connection in between the two. I mean, it's a little bit of a walk, to go from one to the other. But if you're looking to hop from one to the other, you would have to take multiple subway lines in order to get from point A to point B if you were going to do it that way. There's
Yeah.
not a direct route. There is the way they jockey equipment around, whether it be Amtrak's equipment, there is a way to go that sneaks around to Cambridge, but it's not for passenger service whatsoever.
Wayne reports that SEPTA, which is the Southeast Pennsylvania Transit Authority, they're cutting back on their midday service on the Paoli or Poli, Thorndale line due to COVID. There's you saw what happened with Amtrak. A lot of their daily service are have been reverted to thrice, 3 times weekly. So same thing here. So some of their COVID is affecting that. Hopefully, they will restore that service to full service once this thing is kind of over with. But with the kind of reorientating a lot of workers to work from home, now that they're working from home, they kind of like it. I wonder how much of that, how many of the people that have been working from home because of the COVID thing stay working from home after this stops, and see if that affects it. So,
Yeah, I mean
um,
that's the other thing that we're running into is a lot of companies are eliminating brick and mortar. They found that
yeah.
they're able to operate, where they don't need a brick and mortar location. They're able to operate, with everybody remote. They save a ton of money by not renting property. The other thing too is they're not paying for internet, electricity, and all that business. That's
Hmm.
basically dependent on their employees. So,
So that's Paley, by the way.
yeah. But yeah, this is going to be an interesting time once we come out of the
Yeah.
COVID era to see what happens. I mean, there's still a place for the transit system. Hopefully, it's able to still exist. Like you said, typical example: going to airports. You can save a lot of money, save a lot of time, just being able to take transit from point A to point B, and then
Right.
fly off on a plane.
Dale says that he jumped on the light rail from the Minneapolis St. Paul airport down to the Mall of America while waiting on long connecting flights. So I've actually been there quite a few times. I haven't read the light rail there yet, but the last time we were at the Mall of America, we were walking from our hotel to the mall, and sure enough, there's the light rail station, which takes you down to the airport, which is not all that far away from the Mall of America. It's I don't know, a mile, 2 miles, 3 miles away. But the fact that you can ride the light rail from the airport to the mall, and if you've got 4 or 5 hours between connecting flights, that's a great way to a great way to spend it.
Yeah, I mean that's for sure. I mean, if you have the ability to be able to do that, it's affordable
Mm-hmm.
and certainly makes it a benefit.
It looks like the towns and counties along the southern line of Montana are trying to convince Amtrak to come back there. That would be the Montana Rail Link line. The Empire Builder goes through the northern route, and they're trying to restore service on the southern route.
Yeah,
So
I mean, there's a lot of demand for it, whether it be a transit system or just being able to travel, a distance
yeah,
versus. I mean, you think of it, traveling by train is a lot more comfortable than traveling by plane.
yeah,
You have the ability for ability to roam around. So you're not totally stuck to a seat for X amount of hours. There's with a lot of these long distance trains, you have a dining car, so you can kind of leave
hmm,
your seat, get something to eat. Being able to I mean, you look at like a lot of train service way back when it started. I mean,
yeah,
it was really elegant to be able to ride on the train. I mean,
oh yeah,
they it was. I mean, hopefully they'll come back to that where there's a little bit more fine dining to it. I mean,
yeah,
that's kind of separates your planes versus trains. There's a lot more. You can do a lot more food wise alone
hmm,
on a train than you can do on a plane because you can actually have a car with a kitchen in it.
yeah. Well, I mean, and you take a look at the way that you have rail passenger service these days. I mean, you've got there's several layers. You've got the long distance service, the Amtrak service from Chicago to L.A. or from New York to Boston to Washington. Uh, those are that what they call regular passenger service or heavy rail service, and then you've got commuter service, which is a daily Monday through Friday, and sometimes over the weekend, where it takes you from the city to the suburbs, or nowadays, is just as often as from this, from a lot of the workers are going from the city to the suburbs instead of going the other way around. And there are some services now that are kind of avoiding the city altogether, but they're still commuter service. And then you have your rapid transit, which is your subways, your elevated. Those are usually electric. On the Amtrak, almost all that is diesel, except in the Northeast Corridor, which it's electric. And a lot of the suburban stuff, depending on where you are, Chicago area where I'm from, there's a small portion of it is electric, and the rest of it's diesel. New York, there's a lot more electric than there is in, say, New York or in Chicago and some of the other cities. And then you've got that transit, the L service and the subway service. And that's almost all electric. There's very few of those that are not run off electric. Almost all that is. And then you've got the streetcars, the light rail, like the San Diego light rail or the light rail here in Phoenix and a few other places. And that's almost, of course, almost all electric. There are a few of those that are running diesel multiple unit cars or Bud type cars. And have you ever ridden a Bud car?
Yes, I have.
Those are pretty cool. I've done that on the uh, British Columbia Railway back years back. Rode one of those all the way to Little Wet, and that's a lot of fun riding on those.
Yeah, I've done that. I mean, there's some museums that have those. It's
Hmm.
really awesome to be able to ride on that. And what was I gonna say? Um, let's see. Oh, let's see. We've got a little bit of Bart.
Bart.
Yeah.
That's the Bay Area Rapid Transit. So spell check got him on this one. So yeah, Bay Area Rail Transit. They have a station in the international terminal at San Francisco Airport, which makes things more convenient, but it's an expensive trip. Everything in San Francisco is expensive. And one thing they did with the Bay Area transit system, and I don't know why, but I read someplace that they intentionally used a different gauge that they I think it was 5 foot gauge instead of the standard gauge, which is 4 foot 8.5 inches. So there was a reason behind it, and I read it someplace. I can't remember why, but they intentionally used a slightly different gauge, and I don't know if it was to favor a specific manufacturer for cars or something like that. But unfortunately, they don't use the same rail gauge as most everything else does.
Which is kind of strange where everything else is standardized
Mm-hmm.
throughout the whole entire country. The one of the biggest hits for the MBTA commuter rail was their Cape Flyer, which I've written in several blog entries.
Yeah.
I actually rode on the pilot train. We got a little bit of time, so I'll tell a little bit about that. So I rode the Cape Flyer. This was the initial run. It had all the politicians on there. I don't know how I got access to it, but I ended up, my dad, my wife, and my daughter were all on board, and we had the head of the MBTA system at that point, and they would never run two locomotives on each end. Typically, it was a locomotive and a control car on the other end.
Right.
Because they were traveling all the way down to Hyannis, it was a bit of a haul. So if they ended up having an issue with one of the locomotives, they had another locomotive that was a part of the consist. I'm guessing that was part of the reason. The other thing, too, is they were running over crossings where typically, they would see a locomotive on the front end. So they wanted to kind of have that as well. So this was a huge push by the MBTA to do this. So what ended up happening is we departed out of South Station, and they had some sort of error in one of the locomotives. So of course, with this being such a big deal, they had some of the engineering team on the train. They were trying to figure out the error. So we were sitting there for about 20 minutes, just outside of South Station. Now, of course, all the MBTA bigwigs were on the train. The second that we got onto the Middleborough-Lakeville line, which was outside of South Station, you would travel through a section of the line where it was Quincy and Braintree, where a lot of the South Shore lines would share it. We got on the Middleborough-Lakeville line, and we were pushing 100 miles an hour on that line. I've never been on, I rode the train,
Yeah.
Commuter rail on the Middleborough line all the way at the end of the line, when I was in college for 2 years. And I never went 100 miles an hour on that line. So the track, is all welded rail, so it could take it. All I could say is the GM of the MBTA probably said, all right, we can't be late. The media is going to be down there in Hyannis. Yeah. Give her hell. And boy, did we. There was 3 stations in Brockton. Montello, Brockton, Campello. I don't remember the order, but Brockton's in the middle. But the Campello and the other station are, just outside of downtown Brockton. I've never seen those stations go by. Woo, woo. I was like, whoa. And we arrived there. I think we were right on time, because we were able to buzz through there. I'm not too sure if you're familiar with the Cape Cod Railroad Bridge. It's one of these bridges that has weights on each end. So the bridge is in the upright position. And then they would call in. Yeah, it's a rising bridge. Yeah. So they would have the bridge lowered so we could go across the Cape Cod Canal. And that's beautiful to ride over that. One of the times that I rode on the Cape Flyer was on a Friday night. And so it was nighttime and the canal was all lit up. So there was only a few of us. Most of the people, when they go on the Cape Flyer Friday night, coming out of Boston and go to Hyannis. My dad and I basically deadheaded. So we stayed on the train when it went back north. So the conductor asked us, you want to see the lights of the canal? So they turned off all the lights in the coaches, and we were able to see outside. It was beautiful.
Oh, yeah.
But yeah, I mean, I've rode the Cape Flyer at least a couple of times before I left Massachusetts. And I've done a couple of blog entries, so if you're interested, check out the Train Aficionado blog and search Cape Flyer there.
Cool. Well, it's been a great show, and we'd like to say thanks to everybody who watched us tonight. And if there's any more comments or questions, let us know, and we'll take it from there.
Yeah, we'll take it from there. I mean, you can always reach Rich or myself through the Train Aficionado website. We hope that you join us. Let me just remind you. We'll pop up the website right now. So you can follow, like, and subscribe to the Train Aficionado social media. We can't stress enough. Subscribe to the channel. You can stay connected with Train Aficionado with the Trackside Bulletin, which is our e-newsletter. We send that out periodically. You can sign up at trainaficionado.com. Follow, like, and subscribe, of course, to Facebook, Twitter, YouTube, and Instagram. I'm constantly posting there. And this week's show on our other channel is Maritime Monitoring. Catch that Wednesday, March the 3rd, 2021 at 8 p.m. Eastern Time, 5 p.m. Pacific. And subscribe to the Scanner Guys on YouTube as well. And our next show, Train Aficionado Live, next broadcast will be April the 5th, 2021, 8 p.m. Eastern Time, 5 p.m. Pacific. And is there anything else that you want to add, Rich, before we sign off?
I think that's about it. Had a great time tonight.
Yeah, well, hopefully you guys will join us again next month. If you're watching us on the replay, we do this every first Monday of the month. So tune in first Monday of the month. We thank you so much. I'm Jonathan Higgins.
I'm Rich Carlson.
Have a great week. We'll probably catch you on the Wednesday show.
See you then. Bye, guys.
Bye.